And now here I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I have you. So we managed to find an audience. It's great when a plan comes together. It only took 50 years.
Hello, classic rock fans. I am reporting just a couple of days after seeing April Wine and Triumph at the Miller High Life Theater here in Milwaukee. This is Triumph's first tour with original member Rick Emmett since 1988. Now, they have done a handful of one-off concerts with Rick for special occasions in the 2000s and 2010s, but those have been very few and far between. The original lineup of this band stopped touring in the late 80s. In fact, the last show of that original run took place less than a week after I was born. So I have been waiting effectively my whole life for an opportunity to see these guys in concert. And I absolutely believed that that opportunity was not going to come. For as long as I've been a fan of classic rock, I have worked under the assumption that Triumph as a band was effectively done and that they were not ever going to tour again. I actually interviewed Rick on this podcast a couple of years ago, and I didn't even bother asking about the current status of Triumph at that point because I figured the issue was as settled as it's ever going to get. After reading his book and listening to other interviews with Rick at the time, I got the sense that he was perfectly content with the band being largely a project of the past, that he had no interest in ever doing shows with them again, and also not having much interest in doing his own solo shows anymore at that point either. I believe he had announced that he was done doing solo tours before I had interviewed him, and I got the sense that he was just at the point of his life where he just wanted to focus on writing his poetry books and maybe working on archival releases, and maybe writing new music, and perhaps showing up on podcasts like mine to talk about his time in Triumph, but seemingly zero interest in touring with them ever again. But I am happy to report that something changed with Rick late last year, and he decided to turn on the rock and roll machine again for one more tour with Triumph. And as soon as they announced this tour, their show in Milwaukee became my number one must-see show of the year. So let's talk about that show. The opening band was April Wine. April Wine is another Canadian classic rock band, much like Triumph, and seemingly the perfect fit for the opening spot on this tour. I hadn't seen them before, but I've had a couple of chances. They've played Wisconsin regularly over the years. I know they've played Wisconsin Dells, which isn't too far from me, at least twice in the last 10 years. So I could have made the trip out for that, and I'm sure they've played the Chicagoland area as well. But according to Setlist FM, April Wine has not played Milwaukee since like the early 80s. So I don't know how accurate that is, but it might be the case that Milwaukee has been waiting for April Wine to return even longer than we've been waiting for Triumph to return, which is crazy if true, but again, I'm not totally sure on that. All this to say is that I haven't seen April Wine, but I've wanted to. They've been on my list, and I'm glad I got a chance to see them at this show, because they were really good. Now, what's unfortunate about April Wine is that their original lead singer, Miles Godwin, passed away a few years ago. He stepped away from the band in early 2023 due to health issues and then passed later that year. But when he left the band, he handed off his spot to a guy named Mark Parent, and Mark has been the frontman since. And I thought Mark was really good. He sounded great, and he had good stage presence, and most of the songs I heard in the set were new to me, because I'm not the biggest April Wine fan or expert at this point, but I enjoyed everything I heard. They opened their set with their song I Like to Rock, which is one of the songs I knew and also liked. I like songs that are about how great rock and roll is, and this one might be the most direct of all of them. It was a great tone setter for the night, because it's just a statement that everybody in the building could agree with. Yes, you like to rock, We like to rock. That is why we are here tonight. So that was a fun way to start the show. Most of the songs in the set, like I said, were new to me, but I enjoyed pretty much all of them. But they did have one song that all of us knew, their big hit, Just Between You and Me. And that song is great. And a funny thing about that song was a couple of my friends who came with didn't think they knew April Wine at all. And I said, well, I'm sure you know at least one song, Just Between You and Me. And I started to sing it. And they were like, oh yeah, that kind of sounds familiar. And I said, you know how you know that song? Not from the radio, at least not lately around here, because you're not going to hear that on our radio stations regularly. You probably know it from some Time Life infomercial. I couldn't find any video of it, but I swear Just Between You and Me is on one of those compilation CD infomercials from Time Life or maybe some other company, you know, hits of the 70s or monster ballads. One of those compilation CDs where the list of songs would be going up the screen, and it would be somewhere in between Keep On Loving You by REO Speedwagon and Against All Odds by Phil Collins and Total Eclipse of the Heart and Is This Love by Whitesnake. You know, somewhere in there, Just Between You and Me is on one of those collections as well. So when I said that, you know, we all got a chuckle, and it was like, oh yeah, I think that's right, actually. Point being is we knew the song and we liked the song, and the crowd reacted really well. Although, not as well as the crowd reacted to the song after Just Between You and Me, Sign of the Gypsy Queen. That was the song that was clearly the fan favorite of the night, because when they played Sign of the Gypsy Queen, there was a lot of people that stood up to listen, who were cheering and singing along as the song was going. A lot of people pulled out their phones to record part of the song. That was actually the one that most of the fans in attendance were excited to hear. And then they closed their set with another song of theirs that I like called Roller. That's sort of cool. You know, you open your set with I Like to Rock and you close it with Roller, rock and roll. A little poetic there. I don't know, whatever. All this to say is that they were good. I enjoyed April Wine. They were pretty much exactly what you would want in the opening spot for a tour like this. They played good music and had great energy on stage, but they didn't do anything to steal the spotlight from Triumph. And that's appropriate because on a tour like this, it's not just your typical opener headliner deal. Like, this is a special occasion tour. Triumph, in this scenario, deserves all of the spotlight and really all of the attention. So April Wine's job is basically to get people in their seats, play some music that puts everybody in a good mood, and then gets the crowd ready for the headliner, which they did perfectly. And because they did that so well, if April Wine comes around again on their own, I'll definitely go see them. And I'll probably listen to more of their music because I enjoyed the songs that I heard. But again, to restate the obvious, everybody in that venue was there primarily for Triumph. And there was a lot of people in the venue. Miller High Life Theater is one of the bigger venues here in Milwaukee, and I'm fairly certain it was sold out. There's a lot of conversation on social media right now about Blue Dot Fever and about how a lot of tours are struggling to sell tickets. Not this one. Triumph is moving tickets, that's for sure. But it's understandable. People have been waiting almost 38 years to see this lineup of Triumph. Now, I'll get this out of the way before I talk about the show. It's not technically the original lineup of the band. Unfortunately, due to health issues, their original bass player, Mark Levine, is not able to participate in this tour. He's happy that they're doing it. He gave them their blessing. Drummer/singer Gil Moore had the whole crowd give Mike a shout out during Triumph's set. You know, and he talked about how much Mike wanted to be there but just couldn't. And I guess he was there in spirit, if you will. Although there is a contingent of people on social media who are saying it's not real Triumph because Mike's not in the lineup. I've been going to classic rock concerts regularly for almost 20 years now. So I am so over lineup nitpicks about various bands. So, yeah, I have no patience for anyone who's on social media bitching and moaning that this isn't real Triumph because Mike's not in the lineup. That's garbage, and I'm not going to pay it any mind. In fact, I think it was Phil X who snapped back at so-called fans who are making these complaints and just said, hey, if this is your point of view, you're not really a fan, and we're not too worried about it. And I agree with that point of view, because the idea that this somehow isn't an authentic reunion because Mike's not there is a load of junk. It's Gilmore, it's Rick Emmett, you got Phil X back in the band, he played with them in the early 90s, and then you've got a guy named Todd Kearns on bass, and Brent Fitz, who is also playing drums. It's a strong lineup that includes 2 of the 3 principal original members, or whatever. So, if there's anyone on social media bitching and moaning about the lineup, they have truly missed the forest for the trees, and they're being a stick in the mud. They can go kick rocks. So, yeah, if you see comments, just know that that's someone who's angry for the sake of getting angry, and I am over it. So they open the show with When the Lights Go Down, which is sang by Gil, and then Rick sang Somebody's Out There. And they would sort of switch off lead vocals through the whole show, which I assume is how they did it back in the day, but that approach worked really well. But yeah, Somebody's Out There. Oh man, what a fun sing-along. I absolutely love that song, and playing that early was really effective because people stood up as soon as they came on stage, and I think they stayed standing because that's such a great sing-along. And really, most people stood for the whole show, which is crazy considering the average age for most of the people in attendance. There was a bit in the middle of the show where the guys had their various solos, where people, at least in my section, started to sit down just a little bit, but I think that was more just because people needed to rest their feet, not because the energy was declining. And it didn't last very long, because once the solos were done, Rick sang Lay It on the Line, and as soon as the opening notes of that song started, everybody stood back up and were singing along as well. Speaking of the solos, I've said in the past, normally I'm not big on individual instrumental solos, but I didn't mind them in this show. Nobody went overly long, and in particular, Rick, at one point, he brought out his double-necked guitar. In fact, there was a funny moment. One of my friends who came with us doesn't go to a lot of rock or metal shows, so when Rick came out on stage with the double-neck guitar, I heard my buddy go, "Oh, fuck yeah." And he told me after the show he hadn't been to a concert where someone had brought one of those out. And it is kind of a rarity. I haven't seen too many either. Lita Ford had a double neck guitar at one point, and what can I say? It's just a great visual. But Triumph had a lot of cool stuff to look at as they were playing. They had a massive video board behind them with all kinds of interesting imagery that fit in well with the truly unique visuals on their album covers. You know, one of the great things about Triumph is they're a very visual band. Plus, they had some pyro, or sparklers, I guess I should say. It wasn't flames. It was just sparklers going off the top and bottom of the stage. It looked great. Honestly, it felt really old school. Like, that part felt like they were bringing the Triumph experience of 1981, to the venue, and that felt right. One of my favorite moments of the show where Gil took lead was when he did his cover of Rocky Mountain Way. That was also the song where most of the guys did their solos on. And I'm glad they added that to the set list, because keeping a surefire classic rock cover song in the mix works for more casual fans, or maybe people who just know the big hits. In my case, a couple of my friends that came with only knew the big songs from Triumph. So hearing a classic rock song that everybody knows, like Rocky Mountain Way, definitely added to the experience for them as well. Speaking of Rocky Mountain Way, even though Rick didn't sing that song, I asked him about why they covered it when I interviewed him, and what he had to say about it was pretty interesting.
The Joe Walsh thing was one of the things that Gil sang, and so then we'd done our first album, and then the record company was going, okay, let's get a second one going here. And you go, well, geez, we've been out gigging and touring, we don't have a lot of material. And Mike Levine was the producer of our albums at the time, their bass player, and he said, why don't we take a shot at Rocky Mountain Way? Like, we could maybe get that to cross over to AM radio, because it's, if we did it so that it didn't have all, the breakdown talk box thing in it, if it really just had the bang, 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 gang, gang, and it had the chord riff, and we leaned on that, like maybe that would work, and it did. It crossed us over. We were able to jump from sort of being we were a concert act by then, but just barely. But now we were getting enough airplay that we could go across Canada and we could play, the smaller arenas.
And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to take this opportunity to say, if you haven't seen my interview with Rick, I would invite you to check it out, because that is one of the best interviews we've done on this channel. Rick is a fascinating individual, and he had a lot of great stories. In fact, we covered a lot of ground in that interview. So if you're interested in Triumph's story at all, please check that out. I am really proud of that episode. I think the highlight of the night for me was Lay It on the Line, because that is just one of the quintessential tracks of classic rock itself. And Rick sounded great. Like, he has not lost a step vocally, which is crazy given that he's in his 70s. Most classic rock singers of his generation, and several who are significantly younger than him, do not sound as good as they did in their heyday, but Rick does. It is amazing to me that this catalog has sit on the shelf largely untouched and largely not performed live for well over 30 years. And these guys can just pick it back up and turn it back on again like it was yesterday. I've watched their set at the US Festival. I've seen some of their other live performances from back in the day. There is absolutely no noticeable drop-off from their heyday back in the 80s to how they were performing on this tour, which really should exceed basically anybody's expectations. Nobody should assume that someone can just sing like they used to back in the 80s in 2026. But Rick and Gil, I should say, both do. So the quality of the performance on this tour is elite tier. I mean, this is a show that if you're a classic rock fan and it's coming to your town, you gotta go see it. This is a can't-miss show. They closed the set with Magic Power, which is appropriate, and before they played it, Rick talked about why he finally decided to come back to the band, and I thought that was really interesting. He talked for a little while, but basically what he said was, I was happy with where I was at. I had no intention of coming out and doing shows with these guys again. Tongue-in-cheek, he said, I don't need you people, to the audience, of course, half kidding, but also half not. Like, he was content. He was happy with where he was in life. But last year, the Edmonton Oilers were in the Stanley Cup Finals, and Triumph got back together to play a show before one of those games. And I guess that experience was so much fun for Rick that it got the wheels turning for him about doing more shows with Triumph. That's just so perfect. Of course it would be hockey. They really do love it up there, and God bless them for it. It's all good. So that was a fun part of the explanation, but there was a serious element to it as well. He described Triumph's music as joyful noise. And that's because a great deal of Triumph's lyrics are about positivity. Hold on to your dreams. Fight the good fight. The magic power of music. These are very positive and uplifting songs. It's a big part of why I'm a fan. And Rick said, given the state of the world right now and all the negativity that's out there, he felt people needed to hear these songs again. And he didn't get into anything specific or political about what he meant by, the state of the world or whatever. And that's fine. Don't really need that for a show like this. You can go see Bruce Springsteen right now if you want a politically motivated show. But he wanted to bring positivity to an audience again. He wanted to play uplifting songs and give people a break from the pressures that we deal with every day. And I can't tell you how welcome that is. I can't tell you how much I agree. Yes, this is what the people need. This is what people go to see live music for. Positive, uplifting awesome music like the stuff that's in Triumph's catalog. So I thought that was fantastic. I thought it was a great reason for why he wanted to turn this rock and roll machine back on again and get back out on the road. And they delivered, frankly, exceeded on all of my high expectations for the show. It was one of the best shows I've seen in years. It won't surprise me if this ends up being my favorite show of the year, even though I should say I have some tickets to see some cool bands later this year, but we'll cover that as it happens. The point is, this show's incredible. I can't recommend it enough. I recommend it more than almost any other concert that I've talked about on this channel. So, if you're a classic rock fan and Triumph is coming to your town, I absolutely encourage you to go see them, even if you only know a couple of their songs. The catalog is great, nobody misses a note, and the energy is through the roof. This is a show that is absolutely going to be worth the money, whatever you end up paying. So I would definitely recommend you get yourself a ticket to see them, because this very well could be your only chance. They didn't say anything about doing shows beyond this current tour. And frankly, if they announce more dates after this, I'd be surprised. So yeah, I don't know if they're going to be announcing any tour dates after this, but you should absolutely not assume that they will. So if they're coming to your town on this tour, I would recommend acting as if this is your only chance to see them, because it very well could be the case. And that's all I got to say on that. It was an absolutely wonderful night. I'm so happy I got this opportunity to see them. I really did not expect to ever have that opportunity, but thankfully it worked out that they were able to get this band back on the road for at least one more proper tour, and I'm glad Milwaukee was on the list. So yeah, phenomenal experience, great show, can't recommend it enough. So if you go see it, or you have seen them on this tour, please tell me what you thought about in the comments below. Also, if you're a fan of classic rock, please check out some of the other concert reviews I've done on this channel. And check out, again, my interview with Rick Emmett about his book, Lay It on the Line. That, again, is one of the best episodes I've done on this channel. I'm really proud of that, so I think you would enjoy it if you're a fan of Triumph. So the link to that interview is in the description below. And with that, I will just say thank you for watching this video. Go see Triumph if you can. Fight the good fight, and keep rocking.